like to call together the City of Lake Forest, District 67 Board of Education meeting for December 17, 2013. May I have a roll call vote, please, Madam Clerk?
Mr. Anderson?
Present.
Mrs. Fisher?
Present.
Mr. Schuler?
Here.
Mrs. Clemmensen?
Present.
Mr. Borkowski?
Here.
Mr. Lemke?
Present.
Mr. Folker?
Here.
We have a quorum.
Good evening, and thank you all for being here. The first item on the agenda is the President's report. One of the most challenging problems in guiding a school district is to distinguish between good and bad proposals for improving the education of our students. Not surprisingly, for a field full of intelligent, articulate, highly educated people, and especially because the stakes are so high for our children and our society, there's never a shortage of ideas on how to improve, reform, reorganize, or reimagine elementary education. Whether you are a reader of educational journals or the education section of the New York Times, you know that the current period is no different. An almost unlimited number of proposals, many completely contradictory with each other, are always under discussion. Consider some of the ideas we've seen in the past 10 years. We need to focus more on basic skills. We need accountability for teachers in schools. More emphasis on test scores, merit pay for teachers. No child left behind. At the same time, we hear too much emphasis on test scores. We're teaching to the test. Need to focus on creative learning and problem solving. Small class size is the most important thing in education. A new book says that there are actually problems if class sizes are too small. A prominent author says the family environment has the biggest impact. Do kids grow up in a loving community? Kids need self-confidence to feel like they belong. We also hear kids have too much self-confidence. They aren't working hard enough. STEM, as a country, we're falling behind in engineering and science. What about the arts? No problem, by simply adding an A, STEM became STEAM. Problem solved. Online learning, MOOCs, massively open online courses. Maybe we don't even need schools anymore. We want kids to be risk takers. Okay, how does a school do that? We need more teacher evaluations. We need to make teaching a more valued profession. 21st century learning, flipped classrooms. Grit is the subject of a new TED Talk by a prominent educator. Could it be our kids don't have enough of it? Language immersion, better school lunches. One-to-one computers are essential for a meaningful classroom experience until high school, when they're totally unnecessary and possibly harmful. Charter schools, magnet schools, more tracking and gifted programs, less tracking. We need to go faster and cover more material. We need to go slower and actually learn the material. Public schools are failing. Public schools are actually doing great. We need to be more like Finland. The Gates Foundation has all the answers. The Gates Foundation is actually the problem. We need more AP tests, more rigor and standardization. We don't like AP tests. They emphasize rote learning, not creativity. The Common Core is a once-in-a-generation chance to improve educational opportunities for millions of students. Common Core is a cynical attempt to centralize education by the feds. The list goes on and on. Fortunately, there's a surprising amount of common ground. Nobody from the so-called traditionalist camp honestly believes that schools should look like they did 50 or 100 years ago. And the most progressive educators today don't argue that mastery of the basics of science, math, and language isn't essential for success in today's world. The reality, of course, is there's no magic bullet. Education is complex. There are an almost infinite number of variables, and outcomes are ultimately not seen for years. Given the situation, it could be tempting to do nothing and pass the buck on to others to figure out what works and what doesn't. Another temptation would be to chase every fad promoted by a high-profile educator or author. Neither of these options will offer the best outcome for a school district. What is the best approach? At District 67, it's been to study the best practices of high-performing schools, listen to our educators, parents, and students, and use this information to innovate in selected cases. Innovation shouldn't be driven by fads or what is currently popular. It should be driven by a consideration of what will give our students the tools they need to succeed over the course of their lives. In our district, there are currently over 24 innovative pilot programs being tested at some level. They include introducing one-to-one computers at the middle school, selecting classroom furniture which makes it easier for students to learn collaboratively, and many others. The simple truth is that without innovation, a school district can never hope to be great. Innovation attracts top people, fosters creativity, it excites teachers who impart this onto their students, which makes the learning process more meaningful for them. A key part of innovation, of course, is monitoring and learning from experience. When innovation has unforeseen consequences or creates other problems, it's the district's responsibility to address such problems in a timely, thoughtful, professional, and inclusive manner. The Board of Education, with its dual roles of providing vision and oversight to the district, clearly bears the ultimate responsibility for ensuring this is accomplished. And we are fully committed to successfully carrying out this task, along with and on behalf of the community which elected us to serve. That concludes the President's report. Next item on the agenda is the Superintendent's report. Mr. Simmons.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. Following the Superintendent's report is public participation, and following public participation is a report from the head of the LASIC committee, Dr. Dale Truding. I encourage anyone that is in attendance to stay for that presentation. The number of folks that we have with us tonight are here because of a really, really successful program known as commonly as the immersion program. Others might be here because of the unintended consequences of that very successful program. All of the residents are here because they care about their children and they care about the quality of our school district. One of the things that is necessary to point out, is important to point out, is we have a very, very popular program that was implemented at the urging of a large number of parents, and it was actually done faster than had initially been planned or suggested. But we have repercussions from that that are complex to deal with. One of the things that we are committed to, and we have been since my arrival here, and I think before then as well, is to do our due diligence and to look carefully at what is the research on these programs and how can we improve the program that we currently have, and then moving forward, what could that look like? The members of our LASIC committee need to be commended. There's a tremendous amount of work that was done. I also had 2 school board members that served on that committee, and from conversations with them, it's very evident the amount of work that they did and the amount of research that they and their other participants did as part of a long process. In the spring of the year, we spent a lot of time with a number of different meetings, a series of meetings, trying to learn from people that were passionate in one way or another or in the middle about the program at Cherokee specifically. We made 2 commitments at that time. The first of those was to have what's known as PTAC, a Parent Teacher Advisory Committee. The second of those was that we would have a committee that would look carefully at these issues because they are complex. We want to make sure that people know that we have followed through on those 2 commitments. The committee, the PTAC committee, has met on an ongoing basis. LASIC has met with a follow-up to parents after each of those meetings. With the participation in the LASIC committee, one of the things that we did is we first advertised who would like to participate in that. And we had a very tepid response to that, so much so that we had to reissue and beat the bushes, in fact, to get the membership up for that. Every single person that raised their hand to participate, I want to repeat that, every single person that said they wanted to be a member of LASIC was invited and had an opportunity to participate, and I'm pleased to say that with a really wide range of perspectives, those people came and participated, and because of their willingness to participate in an open and honest conversation and a thoughtful conversation about what is good for our community and what is good for our kids arrived at a great deal of commonality. This has been a very thoughtful process. It will continue to be a very thoughtful process. We will have something in place to begin implementation in September. Until that time, I encourage you to stay for the presentation after the public participation so you can see some of what was done. You can hear the conversation between school board members and our administration or Dr. Truding about what that process looked like and what's next. And what's always important to people is what is next. And so, again, encourage people to stay for that. I also like to let folks know that we have had a Rockville revisited. We took a sizable number of our administrators and teachers to benchmark a district in a place called Rockville Center. We brought those teachers and administrators back together to take a very deep and meaningful data dive and look at how we can improve other aspects of our organization. And finally, I'd like to congratulate Dr. Henriksen. Today, an announcement went out from Dr. Henriksen last night. Mundelein Elementary announced that he's going to become their new superintendent. I'd like to take a moment to say congratulations to him. I also like to express the gratitude that I have for his work here and the great sense of loss that I think we all feel, because there is no one more committed, no one harder working, and no one more honest and direct about what he's good at, what he's not good at, what he's working on, and what's next than Andy Henriksen. Andy's been an absolutely fantastic person to work with, and look forward to working with you for the rest of the school year until you begin your duties in May in Mundelein. Thank you.
Andy, on behalf of the board, we'd like to thank you for your service to the community and wish you all the luck in your new position, which is well deserved. The next item on the agenda is public participation. Are there any members of the board who would like to address, of the audience who would like to address the board on any matter of their choosing? Seeing that there are a number, I would ask you to go to the microphone. You can sort of line up if you want, however. Please state your name and address. This is got a little spiel here. This is a very okay. Well, I'll hurry. This is a very important time, part of the board meeting. It's a chance for members of the community to address the entire board. And it's also a chance for us to hear from you about important matters affecting you and your child. We would ask, as we have a number of speakers, to limit comments to 3 minutes. And our esteemed board clerk is actually going to sort of keep track of that so that we can make sure that everyone gets a chance to hear. And we'd ask you that when you come to the podium, please state your name and address. And thank you, and we're very glad that all of you are here and look forward to your comments.
Now I can. Thank you so much. My name is Cindy Kinsley, and I'm here with my daughter Lily, who's 5, and she's a full-day kindergartner at Everett School. I could not find a sitter tonight. I tried really hard. In fact, one of our sitters is here tonight for the high school. My husband's out of town, so anyway, well, I'm sorry I'm not going to be able to stay for the LASIK committee report, but I hope to hear about it from friends. We live down the block from Cherokee, but my daughter goes to Everett. Technically, we transferred because she's a full-day kindergarten program, but we would have asked for permissive transfer because the Mandarin program wasn't an option for her. Lily has something called mitochondrial disease, and she has some speech delays, and her doctor at Children's said that it wasn't an option for her. Oh, you want to help? This was not a ploy, I swear. I really tried 5 sitters, but there's a lot of holiday programs this year. But fearing that the non-Mandarin kids in the program would be segregated, which is what I learned from the first meeting that I met Andy and you, Dr. Simic, that at least the meeting I was at, a large number of parents had shared that the non-Mandarin children were either overtly or subtly segregated or feeling segregated. What I wanted to also say is that I've helped raise my stepson, who went to Cherokee. He loved it, and he's now 17, and he's well on his way to being fluent in Mandarin, but he learned it since DPM, and he's in his 5th year now. He's at high school, senior, and so clearly we're pro-Mandarin family. We've supported him in it, and he does very well in it, and so we're pro-Mandarin, but we're just not pro for immersion in elementary or using taxpayer money to continue to fund it. I would like to say that I think that the Mandarin should be offered, but I think it should be something like with the kindergarten program, we have to pay, it's an opt-in, I think it's reverse. For the kindergarten program, we have to pay $5,000 extra a year to be in full day. So what I think is if people do want Mandarin, I think it should be offered, I think it should be the reverse and people should opt in to pay. You know, okay, Lily, please don't hang on me, sweetheart. I'll be right there, and then I have a prize for you. Okay? I know. I have a Kinder egg that we smuggled in from another country. Don't tell her. Anyway, so I do think that, you know, while it's a financial burden for us, we do it because we felt it was important for her for socialization and also just because we wanted her to be in school longer. But I think if people do want to opt into the Mandarin immersion, it should, again, should be an opt-in. And I also wanted to say that, you know, I think that it's become very divisive. How am I doing on time? Almost 3 minutes? I have 19 seconds, okay. I just think it's the program in general, and I'm sorry I'm not gonna be able to stay to hear everyone's comments, but I think it's, the sad thing for me is I love this town. It's my adopted town, and I think it's pitted neighbor against neighbor, friend against friend, and I think we're child against child, and I think it's been divisive, and I think that otherwise, I know I work for the CTA, we did the same thing, but you know, the people speaking were usually crazy, so I'm used to this. Anyway, thank you so much, I appreciate the time.
Thank you very much for coming. We really appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Oh darn, I had one more thing to say.
Go ahead.
Can I just say one more thing? There's one last thing, I'm sorry, really quickly. I wanted to know, I wanted to really share this with the community, that what are the actual numbers, and that maybe this will come out in LASIK, the cost per Mandarin teacher versus the regular teacher, comparable qualifications, the cost of extra time spent supplementing what's not being learned, and the cost of quality education for the remaining children, and not offering all-day kindergarten for non-immersion students. Obviously, we're really happy at Everett, and Dr. Weimer's here. We're thrilled that we're there, but I also miss not walking her to school like I did my stepson when he was at Cherokee. So, you know, I just wanted you all to consider that.
Understand. Thank you. And could you email those questions to the district?
Oh, Cindy, I'm sorry?
If you email those questions to the district in the morning, we'll make sure you get answers.
Okay, oh, I did through, yes, thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Jennifer Malloy, and I live at 1095 Fairview, and Cherokee is my home school for my children. I'm here tonight because all of our children have different needs. We are fortunate to live in a community that has the means and access to resources to provide a variety of innovative learning experiences. We need to preserve parents' choices to provide the best learning experience for each individual child so that all children can be successful emotionally, socially, and academically. My child needs to continue in the Mandarin immersion program because it provides her joy and confidence that carries over into everything she does. It would be devastating for all of the children in this program to take away an experience they have enjoyed and invested so much time and effort into. My background is in elementary and special education. I had the wonderful experience of teaching at a school in Connecticut that offered an immersion option. It was amazing. My husband and I chose the Mandarin immersion program because of the age at which a second language was introduced and because research has shown immersion instruction to be highly effective. We didn't care if it was Spanish, Mandarin, or something else. It is important to note that research by such experts as Tara Fortune at the University of Minnesota, who has studied language instruction across the globe for over 30 years, demonstrates that immersion instruction in any language is the most successful model of near-native acquisition of a second language. Traditional language instruction across the U.S. is on the decline, but immersion programs are on the rise. I would also like to address the concerns about special education learners and immersion learning, especially in a language like Mandarin. As I stated earlier, I have a master's degree in special education with a focus on interrelated learning disabilities. In addition, I myself have a diagnosed learning disability, and my husband is dyslexic. A true dyslexic cannot connect the sound and symbol, making the acquisition of language through phonics-based instruction virtually impossible. Due to our learning disabilities, the method and age of which traditional language instruction is introduced in the U.S., we were unsuccessful in acquiring a second language. The beauty of a language like Mandarin is that it is picture-based, not phonics-based, which is easier for many students with learning disabilities to learn. The confidence that comes from being successful in the ability to read and write in Mandarin then carries over into a learning disabled child's English instruction. I am grateful to the administration for providing such an opportunity for my child and all the children in District 67. Change is hard, change is scary, but we need to evolve. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.
Guten Abend, meine Damen und Herren. Ich heiße Kurt Bermel. My name is Kurt Bermel. I live at 324 King Muir. I became fluent in German at in my 30s. It was not particularly easy. I enrolled my two youngest children in the Mandarin Immersion program and would have done the same for our oldest had the program existed. I was not sensitive to the language, but to the cognitive advancement of learning a second language after learning English. I have a little study here from McGill University, published in August this year. Learning a second language later on in childhood after gaining proficiency in the first native language does in fact modify the brain structure, specifically the brain's inferior frontal cortex. The study suggests that the task of acquiring a second language after infancy stimulates new neural growth and connections among neurons in ways seen in acquiring complex motor skills. The study's authors speculate that the difficulty that some people have in learning a second language later in life could be explained at the structural level. The later in childhood that the second language is acquired, the greater are the changes in the inferior frontal cortex, said Dr. Denise Klein, researcher from McGill University. As one who learned a second language later in life, I fully support the Mandarin program. I find the current Mandarin program run well. Certainly it has challenges, but I would enroll our kids in it again today without hesitation. I expect our school district, and I applaud them for continuing to look forward-thinking and looking for the next program for our kids. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Rick Florjanic, 208 Glenwood. I'm not nearly as prepared or done my homework as much as the last guy, so I just jotted down a few notes. I'm going to speak based on our daughter's experiences. Andy knows, my wife and I, when we moved back here from Texas, and we were in New York, London, all over the country and globe, frankly, but grew up here, I was against this program. I just thought it would take away from the core, whatever the core is growing up, but I've seen my daughter, we've witnessed our daughter literally in the last a couple months, and she's come out of her shell. So we're huge, and we may not be with our sons. We have twin sons that are gonna be coming up, and I think it's based on the individual. So I recognize all the concerns. I would just say, and being working for a global bank and being around the world, I do see that this is going to be increasingly important. So I think we all agree that with those facts. But again, based on the experience that we're witnessing at home and the creativity and her style, the way she's changed, the way she's learned, I think it's just been a phenomenal change. And I think the fact that there's a choice that's being offered is why I'm a huge proponent of the program, and I think my wife is too. And again, like I said, my sons may not be right for it, and your sons and daughters may not be right for it, but I think having that choice is important. So, thanks.
Thank you. Are there others who would like to address the board? Please come forward.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to address you. This is the first time I've come to a forum like this. I'm from Nigeria, but I've lived in the US for some time. My kids attend, one is in the Cherokee school, and the other is at the middle school. English is not my first language. I know that being able to speak multiple languages is a gift. And being in the United States is a gift. Kids have very significant capacity to learn beyond what we can estimate. And I think that before we consider taking away something that is so beneficial, certainly in my own biased assessment to kids, we have to look at the cost that we're trying to recover. I would like to be very objective and say that because we are very interested in making sure that every child gets what he or she needs, we have to make this decision based on objective things. In other words, since we have introduced Mandarin immersion to the curriculum, what is the damage that has been done to the system? I can tell you that I see nothing that's been harmful on a personal level. It's for the school system to tell us whether having this program has taken away from any other program. My submission is that if the answer to that is no, then I would urge you very strongly to please, let's retain this program, because I think it's a tremendous gift for our kids. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there others who would like to address the board?
Hello, my name is Yasmin Lemke, and I want to thank everybody for coming tonight. And I live in Lake Forest, and my two older children who are currently in high school went through Everett, so I'm an Everett home parent. But my daughter is enrolled in the Cherokee Mandarin program. When she started, she was very shy, quiet little girl who lived in the shadows of her older brother and sister. She decided on her own to do the Mandarin program. My husband and I were both quite shocked at the idea. As a result, my shy little girl blossomed into a confident young lady with something that was uniquely hers, something that she thrived at, and something that she could do that her older siblings could not. Her brother was a seasoned high school band student and rugby and football player. Her sister was dedicated to chorus and art and just good at everything. Yusra finally had something she dedicated herself to and something she absolutely loved. Everyone that goes to school becomes involved in a group that classifies them: sports, music, or even being a double questie at DPM, or at the elementary level. You can still be in a group and be a part of your school. Isn't that what everyone strives to encourage their kids to do? Let her be a Mandarin kid. Some kids are classified as band kids or chorus kids or quest kids. I pay tax dollars so athletes can train at the school for sports my children don't participate in. We pay tax dollars for some kids who have to be bused from DPM to the high school because they are in a higher math. Although we haven't experienced any hostile environment at the school, I feel for the mother whose child came home crying. No parent wants to see their child crying. Although we as parents at one point or another have comforted a crying child who came home from school. My own daughter came home in tears because she didn't make the tennis team. She feared her friends that made the team would become closer to each other and more distant from her, but it never crossed my mind to protest that my tax dollars stop being spent on high school tennis team. A bit of friendly advice, and this is with the utmost good intentions, from one parent to another, and I say this with the best intentions. Help your child find something they truly love. It will benefit your child 1,000 times more than taking something away from other children. It would be a crime to take away the Mandarin program. If anything, it would be extended to the middle school. That would make it even better. I'm surprised it took Lake Forest so long to implement an immersion program. My nephews in Vernon Hills have been in the immersion program for years. And I really want to thank everyone who helped start the immersion program and all the teachers and everyone. I know these first couple years are very trying for everyone, but I'm sure, that with some tweaking and some work, whatever divisions exist will eventually disappear. And I just really want to thank everyone for this wonderful opportunity. My daughter absolutely loves the immersion program, and she has absolutely blossomed, just like the banker had described. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Hi, my name is Nicole Korzak. I live at 1701 South Ridge Road. I am a Cherokee zoned parent. My daughter is in the Cherokee immersion program. I will keep my comments very, very brief because they're very similar to others who have just spoken. Nothing is perfect, and anytime something is new, there are bound to be challenges or you're not doing it right. You know, if we just took the path of least resistance and kept with the status quo, there would be far less controversy. But would we really be serving our children and following the mission statement that the board, the faculty, and the administration follow, which is providing the most excellent education we possibly can for our children? As I pondered potentially speaking tonight and the thoughts and concerns I have heard addressed over the last several months, I came back to the question of why in a school district that really is high performing and as excellent as our district is, why can there not be programming that can facilitate an excellent traditional program and an excellent immersion program? Just like there's an excellent band program and an excellent orchestra program. I'm a financial gal. I was a managing director of a private equity firm before I retired. Dollars and cents, there's all this taxpayer money. If I did not have a lovely Mandarin teacher teaching my daughter for half the day, someone would be teaching her. This is not a pull-in or a push-in program. You know, there are children who get pulled out for enrichment. There's push-in for Latin. And not all the children participate in those. I don't get to check a box on my taxes as to what funds go to one thing or another. It's for the overall benefit of the students in our community. If I didn't have children going to school, if I was retired and my children were out of the house, I'd still have to pay taxes. So I'm sure that you all have comprehended that. The overall cost of the program, I think, next year is very minimal, especially when you look at the potential of having almost 200 students in the program from kindergarten through fourth. I guess my takeaway is my daughter's having the most wonderful experience. Her English teacher is wonderful, nurturing, caring, credentialed, and fabulous. Her Mandarin teacher is nurturing, credentialed, caring, fabulous, enthusiastic. It's a joy to be able to participate in it. It is cutting edge. It's not the first one in the world. Change is hard, but change can be really, really good. And I just thank you for having the courage to put this program in and having the courage to address everyone's concerns. There are some social concerns that I know everyone has heard, and I'm sure as a district we will do our best to facilitate the traditional program remaining excellent, and hopefully the Mandarin program remaining excellent as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi there. Thanks for listening or having this forum for the parents to speak. I actually hadn't planned to speak. My name is Florence Wu. I currently live at 1555 Bowling Green Drive in Lake Forest. I just wanted to speak to a couple of points. I grew up in San Francisco, California. I'm Chinese. My parents speak Cantonese, and growing up, my parents wanted me to learn the Chinese language. In San Francisco, California, we actually didn't have a Mandarin immersion program available, and when we moved over here about 18 months ago, we were thrilled. My husband and I were thrilled that Lake Forest actually offered that as a part of the public school curriculum. Having my son been in this class for about 64 days now, we've watched him blossom. I have twin boys as well. They're both 4 years old right now. And I've seen kind of a trickle-down effect from the lessons and homework that my child brings to school, brings home from school. And And we weren't expecting the twin boys at home to be completely excited about Mandarin as well. But you know, that's what teaching in academics is about, I think, is challenging your students, challenging kids to want to learn and to be excited, and I see that. And so I find that this program is very valuable. I mean, I've heard people talk about, you know, we should have an opt-in, and I think Mandarin program is an opt-in program. It's not mandated or required for all the families to participate in. I mean, we're an Everett School family, but we wanted to be in Cherokee because of this, and I see a lot of value in it. And I'm hoping that as a board, you guys will continue this on through the years and have it available for my twins when they become of learning age as well, because they are completely excited, and they're actually teaching us as well, because I don't speak Mandarin. My husband doesn't either, but we're learning from our own children. And you know, I'm around 30, and it's hard, but seeing them excited, we're actually at home playing Mandarin games as well, and we're having our son teach us, and having I also see that there's a level of self-confidence that he gets as well from being able to teach his mom and dad new tricks. You know, it's hard for us to learn. So I just wanted to underscore that we think that this program is extremely valuable. Growing up in San Francisco, even California, we moved down to Southern California as well. This was not available at all. And moving out here to Lake Forest, it's an amazing and I think innovative program to have in this school district. So I wanted to thank you from the bottom of my heart for having this, and I'm hoping that it'll continue in the years to come.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Georgia Kiriakou. My address is 454 Beverly Place in Lake Forest, and our home school is Cherokee Elementary. I have a daughter who is in 2nd grade who is enrolled in the Mandarin immersion program. I want to echo many of the sentiments of the other parents tonight to just let everyone know how enormously pleased we are at this opportunity and the forward-thinking nature of the district to offer an immersion program in Mandarin. While I echo the sentiments of many people, I also want to implore the Board of Education to put out some facts to dispel some of the mythology that exists in our community about what's good and what's bad. And sometimes people are not willing to articulate what their fears are, but I think the Board of Education needs to address them. The first is the taxpayer dollars being diverted away from the normal curriculum or for special needs kids and being diverted toward Mandarin. And I echo the sentiment of the parent who said that these children who are in the Mandarin program will cost taxpayer dollars. My daughter needs to be educated, and the cost is the same, whether her teacher speaks English or Chinese or a different language. So I think it's important to put out to the community that the tax burden is tax neutral for the Mandarin program, if that is in fact true. I also would like someone to dispel this notion that this is a divisive program. I have not seen that. I'm at Cherokee on a daily basis. I don't see that other children are treated badly. It's true that kindergartners and 1st graders during recess play with the children in their own classroom, not because they don't like the kids in the other classroom, but because it's age appropriate to interact with the children you know, not the children you don't know. And I have even been told, this is an outrageous comment that I don't think people would say in a public forum, but I have even been asked, how am I certain that my children are not being taught communist propaganda? And it's hard to address that because I don't speak Mandarin. But I can tell you, it's true. But we live in a small world, and technology is readily available. And every week my daughter has to learn 6 new Mandarin characters. And so what I've started doing is going to Google Translate. And for those who are not familiar, there's 2 windows in Google Translate, and you pick one language you want to start and the other language where you want to end, and you put in English. And this week we had weather words, sunny, cloudy, rainy. The previous unit was the seasons, fall, summer, winter. And you can put fall and winter and summer in the English, and they'll translate, and the same character comes up. And you can press a little button to tell you the pronunciation of the character, which as a parent helps me. And so you can self-check. We can dispel this mythology. Our children are not being indoctrinated. And many people think this is not a program choice. I want the Board of Education to reiterate that it is a choice. And it's a strong choice for both the Mandarin students and the traditional students. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there other members of the community who would like to address the board? Thank you very much all for coming. We appreciate it. And you're welcome to stay for the next 3 hours of the board meeting. The next item on the agenda is reports and discussions. And Mr. Simic.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. And as mentioned earlier, we will have a report on LASIK, an update, and this is from Dr. Dale Truding. And Dr. Truding I've known about Dr. Truding for quite some time. She was the spiritual leader, facilitator of our LASIK conversation that's been taking place since August of this year. She stepped in September. And Dr. Truding and Mrs. Fagel, I think the two of them will tag team on this. So thank you all for staying.
Are you certain you want to do it in this order? We're having a little technical difficulty here. Could we do another bit before this bit? Or do you want me to wing it, which I could certainly do? We got 1 minute.
Don't wing it. No, the slides are actually quite helpful. So,
Yeah.
Mr. Anderson, what about if we go to our board committees and then come back to the LASIK report?
Okay, we will move ahead to board committee reports. The first report this evening is the Education Committee, chaired by Lesley Fisher. Ms. Fisher.
Good evening, and thanks to all the brave ones who remain. We met on November 19th, and the first item on our agenda was the charge of the committee. This is something that, in fact, one of our members, Jeff Folker, had encouraged us to really articulate, as he is new on our education committee. I've had the privilege to chair the education committee for over 2 years now, and while we've got a lot of new administrators and we've got new board members who have joined the committee, we thought it was a good time to really articulate the charge of the committee. Some of the things that we wanted to include in that charge were obviously the notion that it's comprised of board members, administration, and committee members. Not necessarily a decision-making group, but a vetting format for things that are coming down the pike. It is driven by the administration, the Board of Ed, and the committee members are encouraged to add things to the agenda. It is a vetting process where curricular and educational initiatives are discussed, and we go through and say, do you think this is something we are ready to bring to the board? And if it's not, let's discuss it further. We also talked about that the charge of the Education Committee should align with the Finance Committee, as these are the two head committees that come under the subset of the Board of Education. So, to that end, the final committee charge of the Education Committee is the purpose of the Education Committee is to vet and provide guidance to the administration on major educational initiatives and district goals. And while this seemed a rather laborious task to go through and articulate this charge, I'm very glad we did it. I'm proud of our group, and I would like to thank all of the committee members who were present that day, including Mr. Folker, Mr. Simic, Lauren Fagel, Lori Wilcox, as well as community and board member Mike Borkowski and community members Patrick Pat and Veronica Pat. Appreciation to all for their time. We also discussed LASIK, which I won't steal your thunder. There's going to be a presentation, a detailed presentation momentarily. We discussed LASIK in detail, and we discussed the Rockville trip, which I already talked about last month, but did a recap for the Education Committee on the visit that 29 to 30 members from the District 67 schools, teacher leaders, administrators, and a few board members got to attend, where we really looked at a lighthouse school. And that really was it. As we go to next month's, or I'm sorry, February's Educational Committee meeting, something on the agenda that we did not have time to get through will be the Illinois School Report Card update. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Fisher. Is Dr. Hendrickson ready for this presentation?
We are ready. Sorry about that. So we've been working hard, as you've heard. LASIC is Language Acquisition School Integration Committee. This was the district committee that we formed to look at the issue of world language acquisition as we were doing it and looking forward to how we can improve it. The charge was to make a recommendation to the superintendent regarding the reshaping of world language learning in District 67. We brought together a large group of people, and we hired a facilitator, who I'm going to introduce in a minute. The facilitator came with lots of skills. In fact, a design thinking process from Stanford was one of the repertoire tricks that she brought to it. It was a 5-stage process to bring all ideas out, and not just a few that had come out of the May and June meetings. So we began with a blank chalkboard and filled up multiple chart papers and worked through a long process where we worked to consensus. At this point, we have lots of chart paper and lots of great opinions. We're looking to analyze those opinions and move forward. This is the committee. We have teachers, administrators, board members, parents from all 3 schools, parents from both English and Mandarin programs. And these were Monday night meetings monthly from 6:30 to 9, and everyone was really invested. We had a guest speaker come and teach. We did readings. I couldn't be more proud of this group. They came with various perspectives, some very strong perspectives, and retained those strong perspectives and yet really worked together as a team. It was a great process and continues to be. Lauren Fagel, our Assistant Superintendent of Curriculum Instruction, Technology, and Assessment, was superior in bringing forward the process and bringing the ideas together. We also hired Dale Truding. Dr. Dale Truding is the Assistant Superintendent of Curriculum Instruction in Arlington Heights. Dale has an extensive background in world language acquisition from the districts that she's served, so she knows this topic well, but it's not really why we hired her. It was the way she has worked with groups in Arlington Heights and Michigan to bring forward consensus on a tricky process, and she did a stellar job. So she and Lauren are going to take over.
Thank you, Andy. One of our first tasks as the LASIK group was to establish group norms. So the group came together on August 12th for its first meeting and determined that these norms would guide our work. We would seek to understand before seeking to be understood. We would listen more than we speak, share our own opinion, not that of someone else, speak loudly so all can hear, one speaker at a time, show respect for others' opinions, take breaks as individually needed. It's all about what's best for the kids, and all voices have equal weight. Bringing in Dr. Truding with expertise in the design thinking process really allowed us to put those norms into practice, and she will explain the history of the model and the steps in the model and the dates that we processed those steps.
Thank you, Lauren. I just want to say that I've had the opportunity to facilitate groups for a number of years, but there was something very unique and special about this group of stakeholders. Parents, teachers, administrators, parents who are board members really coalesced around our mission and what our goal was, and they always kept the best interest of kids at the center of any decisions that were made. So I commend the community for this type of effort and how unselfish people were to give up all that time during all of those meetings. The design school at Stanford University started in the year 2005, and it was really based upon work that began in the late 50s and early 60s in terms of how do you go about a process of coming up with solutions that improve the environment. It was a process that was used in engineering and science and then moved to the business field and now has become a very popular process in the field of education. And I remember after our first meeting saying to the committee, and many members are here, you have to trust the process. It's messy. Everybody's voice will be heard. Everybody's voice will be respected in the group. We accomplished the task that we set out to accomplish in 5 meetings. The first meeting happened before I got involved in the process, and it happened in the month of August. And the first step of the design thinking process is understanding. And it's about hearing people's stories. It's about a committee gaining empathy from various people's perspectives. And we know that the district, I know that the district went through a series of meetings with parents who were concerned about what's happening to their elementary school, parents who were concerned about the fact that if their child didn't take immersion, they would be maybe left out from some part of the school culture. Issues that were surrounding what people thought were best for their kids, and also issues about how's the best way to program in a school district. So all of those stories were heard. We had an opportunity to summarize those stories for the entire group, also when I joined the group in August. We then had an opportunity for people to get all their ideas out on paper. It's like 100 is the magic number. We wanted people to come up with what they thought would be the best programming ideas for reshaping world language in District 67. There were stickers all over this room, and people were like, so what are we going to do with these stickers? What is this whole process all about? And next, we had people take all of their ideas, 1 sticker per idea. We probably had 400 ideas in this room, and categorize them and see how the ideas fit together. People in the room said, this is a problem. I'm not an educator. And we said, everybody's voice needs to be heard. Everybody has ideas that are valuable in the process. So we went through that ideation process in August and September. And then we had all of those ideas classified. But the next important part of the process is to gather data, to take those ideas and see if they are based upon research, best practice, effective practices. And so we had Dr. Tara Fortune come in from the University of Minnesota, who has had over 30 years of experience dealing with immersion programs and best practice in world language programs. She shared a plethora of information. She shared best practices. She shared research studies. She was available for us to ask any questions, and she answered them. So people who were educators, people who were parents, and people who are administrators really gained a great deal of information. We also read articles. We had people on the committee share different programs that they had had an opportunity to observe. So our data collection happened in September and October. Then, after we had all of that information, the next step, which is the prototyping step, which I believe is the most exciting part in the entire design thinking process, is getting committees of people together. And we had 5 different committees The committees were made up of parents, teachers, and administrators. They then went back to all of those 400 sticky notes that they had produced. They had them in categories, and then they decided, based upon the data, what are the best programs that we can offer to our students. And so at the end of the evening, on December 9th, we had an opportunity to listen to each group present their prototype. Not only did they present what they thought would be the best way to reshape world language in District 67, but they also had evidence for each point in their prototype. And the evidence was based upon all of the collective data that we had. And now it's time to test those prototypes. And Lauren Fagel is now going to share the next steps in the process.
So the test phase of the design thinking process began with LASIK on December 9th, but it will continue over the next several weeks through the next steps. So the LASIK leadership team, which is comprised of myself, Andy, Dale, Carolyn Crummis, our Director of Mandarin Immersion, and Kelly Jackson, our principal at Cherokee Elementary School. We will present the 1 to 2 prototypes that were recommended by LASIK, and 1 to 2 came of 6 by consensus building. So the last act of the members of LASIK was to put their preference through stickered dots on each of the 6 prototypes to show their support or their concerns. So out of the 6, the 2 with the most consensus around them will be shared with Mr. Simic, along with strengths and challenges of each of those 1 to 2 prototypes identified by LASIK. Mr. Simic will then direct the instructional leadership team of District 67, which is comprised of all of our principals, assistant principals, directors, and myself and Dr. Henriksen, to vet the 1 to 2 prototypes through 5 different lenses: curricular and educational programming, financial and staffing, community support, professional development, and contractual. So we will spend a significant amount of time, several hours at a minimum, taking those 1 to 2 prototypes that came from the 6 and working them through those 5 different lenses. Next, Mr. Simic will take the 1 to 2 prototypes and share them with various stakeholder groups. The Board of Education's Education Committee, which Ms. Fisher talked about, our District World Language Committee, which is comprised of almost all of our K-8 world language teachers, our various parent groups, and our staff. Finally, Mr. Simic will recommend a final prototype to the Board of Education. Implementation. We would be on track to implement the first phase of a prototype in August 2014. Which, working backwards, means that between February and August, there would be a lot of planning and preparation. Oops. Any questions about the process, the next steps? I would also like to thank the board and Mr. Simic for bringing Dr. Truding on as a facilitator. Her expertise with both world language and the design thinking process really, really enhanced our work as a committee. And this design thinking model, I think, made everyone feel like their voices were heard. And the general feeling amongst LASIK on that last night was really positive and productive.
Thank you, Lauren. This is a little bit off the grid, but I thought we should ask some community members if they had a couple of questions to address Lauren or Andy about the LASIK process, and really focusing on the process more than the results.
I'm just curious, and it doesn't necessarily have to do with the implementation, but you looked at world languages, not just Mandarin.
Correct.
How was taking into account how different the languages are? Let's say I look at a Roman language versus Mandarin versus Latin.
So,
how did that play out?
Yeah.
Sure. To restate the question, it was how did we take into account, first you stated that we looked at more than just Mandarin,
yes, all world language programming. And you asked how we took into account the different natures of each language. So prototypes by design are very messy. And the work of the committee was not to get too deep into which particular languages or any of the other logistics. It was really more about kind of mock-ups of the various programs. So as the instructional leadership team looks through the various lenses, and in particular, I would say the curricular and educational programming lens, that's where we need to look at specifically what you're asking about.
Volker.
Dr. Truding, a quick question for you. I'm sorry, I didn't get a chance to ask you earlier. In your experience and in the research, do you find that in a public environment there's a minimum enrollment population that makes an immersion program more adaptable, more seamless? I'm just curious. I know that there are
I don't
districts
have that
around here, but
information,
they
and
are
it would
sizably
really
larger. I'm just curious.
depend upon the size of the district, and would depend upon the district's philosophy and how they wanted to implement it. It would be a lot of individual factors, but there is no magic number.
Mr. Lemke.
Lauren or Andy, or I'm wondering under the stakeholder list, will teachers be involved and not just the world language teachers?
Yes,
but
staff, which incorporates all of our faculty and staff.
Okay,
And actually, we
all the elementary schools.
purposely put staff because it's beyond just our certified teaching faculty, but all of the adults who work in our building play an important role and influence the educational environment. So yes, that's critical to the process. The World Language Committee exists as a separate entity made up of teachers, and that's obviously they have a particular lens that they would look through.
Hearing no more questions, thank you very much for your reports. We now return to board committee reports. The next one is the Finance and Operations Committee, Mr. Rick Schuler.
Thank you, Bill. A week ago, the Finance and Operations Committee met. We had two primary components to the meeting. The first was an audit review with Miller and Cooper. Real concisely, the financial statements were determined to present fairly our financial condition. A little more interesting part of the discussion came with respect to controls. As board members, we all want to make sure that there are checks and balances and dual and triple controls when it comes to expenditures. And we asked very point blank, were there any red flags? Are proper procedures being followed? And the answer was a definite yes. Nobody approves their own expenses, and in all cases, there are dual or triple controls. The meeting overall was 4 hours. It was a very long meeting. I'm going to try to make this reasonably brief summary, but I am going to get into a little bit of detail because I know there was a fair amount of consternation over the second topic, which was the approval or disapproval of the recommended tax levy increase. The goal of this part of the discussion was as follows. After receiving and reviewing a compilation of data that we appreciate being put together by Jennifer and her team, the goal was to conduct a more ground-up view of the budget analysis to make a better, more informed decision on the proposed tax levy increase. And to remind you from the last meeting, the increase recommended was capped at the lesser of the inflation rate, or 5%. That proved to be 1.7%. And an estimate for growth in housing would add another roughly 0.3%. So we'd be looking at roughly about a 2% increase in revenues available. I do want to add that the meeting was truly collaborative and comprehensive. It was a collaborative and comprehensive effort. Attendees included all of the district 67 board members, our 2 community reps, Carol White representing the operations side, Brittany Schramm and Jennifer Hermes representing operations and finance, our superintendent, Mr. Simic, and our super assistant attendant, Andy Hendrickson, were there, and Lori Wilcox and Lauren Fagel. It was very valuable having them there representing the education side. And they all were heavily involved in the discussions and had a lot of questions to answer. I will say finance and operations certainly must coincide, but we expanded this beyond the usual combination of finance and operations to include the education side, and that was a big part of the discussion. We wanted to look at both capital expenditure and education initiatives that were on the horizon, and we spent a fair amount of time discussing them. Discussions revolved around an examination of primarily the 5-year budget. That was the centerpiece of the discussion, with an eye on forecasted surpluses and deficits each year, levels and changes in our surplus, and we also addressed, as I mentioned, more of the discretionary capital expenditures above the base level and new education initiatives that were contemplated. First, I would like to address the capital expenditure component of the budget. Over the next 5 years, we're looking at spending, or we're at least budgeting, about $1.1 million for capital expenditures. This compares, it does compare, I should say, to the historical average, which has been about $1 million. And I say the historical average, that's over the past 10 years. So no surprises there. The base amount in the budget allowed for primarily life safety upgrades, some which have yet to be specified or required by the state. We should hear that by the spring. It also included primarily asbestos and tile removal, which is an ongoing job, not a friendly job at the middle school, and asphalt paving. This does not include wants and discretionary type capital expenditures, such as an example, the Cube project that was recently completed at the middle school. I'll make a comment that the last major capital upgrade program dates back to 2000. The next wave of improvements was postponed during the recessionary period as we incurred a deficit for a year or two period. We are now through that period, and a focus of ours has to be on what's been neglected and what do we need to enhance our teachers and our students' experience. I think it was Mr. Simic that threw out the analogy, we have renovated the bathroom, and now we are ready to update the rest of the house, and I added within the context of what we can afford. We all agree, I believe, that newer, more flexible, effective learning spaces like the Cube facilitate a lot of things that we all desire. Group learning, and I would add any learning. It makes it more interesting for the kids. It allows for technology-based learning, which is a focus. And it provides for great, interesting furniture, interesting space, better lighting, all creates greater interest and enthusiasm, and even ties to the flip system that you've been hearing about. The second major component that we discussed to identify where our future expenditure is coming from, outside of what's been targeted in the 5-year budget, is the education side and the enhancement of spaces and the flip system. This is all a good segue into the next discussion, which was there are many desired enhancements to staffing, which we tried to prioritize. I would say Lori and Lauren led the discussion, but I think it was a consensus that, and certainly Mr. Simic shared this, that we would like to have, if we could and could afford it, more reading and math specialists, coaches and support persons, within the classrooms, permanent substitute teachers, special education support, all with the goal of moving students from, I think you'll recall the quadrant, the 4 quadrants. The least desirable quadrant is, there are 2 axes, growth and achievement. And the worst quadrant is, of course, the lower left quadrant, where they're not growing and they're not achieving. The neutral quadrants being upper left, lower right. And we want to move everybody to that upper right quadrant where they're not only achieving, but they're growing. So I just don't want to lose sight of what all this means. It's all with that, you know, if I could come up with one goal, it's that. And how do we want to spend money? Where do we want to spend money? It's to move people to that upper right quadrant. The other reason I noted and why I bring this up is, and why I like that chart, the quadrant chart, is it's measurable. So if we're spending taxpayer dollars and people ask, well, is that money well spent? We do measure this. The kids take the tests and we see, are they progressing in achievement and growth? So you can look 2, 3, 5 years down the road at how much did we increase spending? More importantly, where did we spend it, and did it help that, you know, large goal? Now I'll get to the conclusion. My conclusion itself is rather long. I apologize. We looked at capital expenditures, and really to quantify it, I think we concluded that we could easily spend $500,000 per year above the $1.1 million that's already in the budget for enhancements above the base level. On the education side, we could easily benefit from 10 to 30 additional support teachers, coaches, and specialists. It sounds like a lot, sounds like not a lot. It depends on your paradigm. But the reality or the compromise is that an increase of 2% in annual expenditures, which is really the rate of inflation, provides about $600,000 of incremental dollars per year. And, you know, as I wrote that down, I realized most of that's actually eaten up by inflation, right? Because salaries go up, heating, electric goes up. So even if our revenues are going up 2%, that's not leaving a 2% or $600,000 available for discretionary spending. Most of that is actually eaten up by inflation. But as an example, if we added, or were somehow able to add, or made room for 15 educators, that would be roughly $1 million per year. And even with no increase in capital expenditures for discretionary spending, you know, new, better spaces, within our 5-year budget, our surplus would be reduced to $1 million to $2 million, which is like 6% of our expenses, lower than our stated objective. Therefore, a tax levy, I would claim, of 1.7 to 2%, or the inflation rate, seems completely justifiable, at least for the upcoming year. And of course, even with that, we still will not, we would not be able to afford most of these more discretionary wants. I did add a big caveat, and this was discussed at the end of the meeting. It's sort of an agreed upon premise, and that is revenues or taxes can increase by the rate of inflation, and that's all fine and necessary, but we need to continually strive for value. Value. In other words, the question should not be how much do we want to spend, as most crafty contractors will ask you, how much do you want to spend? I hate that question. I don't know how much I want to spend. I want something of value. So I would pose the question differently. What do we need and want, and how do we want to get, and how do we get the best value for what we choose to do? That's what we should be, as a board, tasked to do, and that's what the community should be looking at from us, I think, or we think. This is a group discussion. How do you look at value? I asked the question, and I think the consensus was, number one, better teachers, number two, more teachers, and number three, in order, better facilities. While all this is happening, we must, of course, keep an eye on our debt, and we must keep an eye on our surplus. In other words, we must live within our means and not cheat the future of our kids and our taxpayers. How this gets done? Ongoing circular dialogue between the education group, the finance group, the operations group. It's an iterative process, and I would say that the meeting we just had was the best meeting I've attended since I've joined the board. It was exactly that. It was looping back and forth between these three different disciplines, and I think that's what made it so effective. I will make one last side note that our existing debt level of $14.5 million, when I say debt, I mean long-term debt, it amortizes now, but in the years 2019 and through 2021, it amortizes on an accelerated basis down to zero. So what does that mean? That means post-2021, debt service of $2 million goes away. And in essence provides, it does not provide two, but it actually makes about $1.5 million more available per year for spending. That's a big deal, but unfortunately that's not within the 5-year budget, and so we can't count on that at this point. The other potential source of funds other than increased taxes and cutting expenses is to the extent that the surplus exceeds 10 to 15% of our expenses, we could use any excess fund balances towards some of these wants on the education and capital expenditure side. Now I'll ask the other board members, did I misrepresent anything? Do you have any questions or anything to add? That was a 4-hour meeting.
Yep. I would like to add, though, the meeting was lengthy. Certainly, it was necessary. And funny that Rick said that. Rick and I came on the board at a similar time period, and this was probably the most worthwhile meeting I've been at. I look forward to more collaboration in the future. I want to thank Mr. Borkowski, Mr. Schuler, and Mr. Lemke for encouraging those of us who serve on the Education Committee to come over to the other side and to listen. We learned a lot from Ms. Hermes. We learned a lot from Lauren and from Lori and from Mr. Simic and from the community members being there. And we appreciate your leadership. Thank you.
And Bill, I promise never to speak that long again, as long as I'm on the board.
No, thank you, Rick. Rick has led an incredibly thorough discussion of the tax levy, I think the most comprehensive I can remember. And I think it's terrific that it's involved. Every member of the Finance Committee has been involved. And the fact that you have folks coming from education and all of the board is really something. Had I not been at a previously scheduled Christmas party in Dallas, I would have attended as well. Are there other questions or comments? All right. Thank you very much, Rick. Not technically, but yes. Go ahead.
Expenditures and discretionary expenditures. What kind of risks are you looking at, and where? That's obviously a topic that you're discussing. So, what kind of discretionary expenditures are you looking at that may not be necessary?
I think what you're asking is where could we cut expenses? Where do we have non-optimal expenses already occurring? Is that what you're saying?
How are you brainstorming? How are you problem solving to get any corrective action, anything to get you a lower base of costs on your system?
I will give you 2 examples. Number one, anything that is bid out, we have a minimum requirement of, is it 3? 3 bids? So, you know, there's no no bid situation. I think that helps a lot. I guess if you're looking at that question, you want to look at the 80-20 rule. You know, where are 80% of your expenses? It's salaries. So that kind of narrows down your potential waste question. You know, that's how many teachers do you have and is it the right number? We've had a declining student population, although it declined a lot less than we expected this past year. It's hard to forecast a trend, but I think that we believe that the trend is going to change based on, we had an interesting discussion on this, home prices. Home prices in the community have hit bottom, turned, and are on the way up. And again, we don't know, but that may be an indication that the population will change and bottom out as well. So, you know, can you cut teachers? Can you cut their salaries? That's a tough question, and it's a whole nother discussion. Yeah, but I mean, if you're looking at where their excess costs, 80% of our costs are salaries. So, and the you know, on the operations side, everything's bid out. So we don't see a lot of fat. We looked at it, we asked the question, we didn't find. Yes. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Rick. And I apologize for my comment earlier. We welcome questions from the community about all matters. Our next report. Okay. Our next report is from the
4 hours. That was one meeting. That wasn't the only meeting. Yeah, there's more than 4 hours.
All right. Our next report is for the Policy Committee, chaired by Mike Borkowski. Mr. Borkowski.
The Board Policy Committee has not met since our last board meeting. Our next meeting is scheduled for January 9th, 2014. That concludes the Policy Committee report.
Thank you. We now come to liaison reports. These are organizations to whom board members serve as liaisons. The first one is the NSSED. Liaison Mike Borkowski.
The NSSED Governing Board met last week on December 9th. At this meeting, a number of issues were presented, and I'll quickly touch on a few that are relevant to our board. First, the NSSED auditors were present and provided an overview of the audit results. NSSED currently is in fine financial health, and no major financial or compliance issues were detected by the auditors. We, as the District 67 board, care about that because as a member district, we are responsible for funding NSSED in a pro rata fashion in the case of financial crisis. The most likely scenario of that happening would be if the state of Illinois simply stopped making their payments to NSSED, which is always a possibility. Next, the board had a conversation about the process that occurs when a member district files their intent to withdraw from the co-op, which District 112 has now done. We were informed that 6 months prior to the actual date of withdrawal, which occurs 18 months after the paperwork is submitted, each Board of Education from each member district must take a formal vote on the withdrawal, determining it to either be a consensual withdrawal or a non-consensual withdrawal. If any one member district's Board of Education does not vote for a consensual withdrawal, then the petitioning district, District 112 in this case, must file a non-consensual withdrawal, meaning they need to provide additional evidence of support of their ability to provide special ed services to the regional office of the superintendent. There's not an urgency on this matter to our board, but it's something that we will likely be discussing over the next year and voting on either next December or January of 2015. Lastly, and probably most relevant, the NSSED superintendent reported to the governing board on the progress being made in the so-called transformation of NSSED. This is a topic that the NSSED administrative team has been discussing for some time, but the sense of urgency has definitely increased both as a result of District 112's intent to withdraw and also as a result of our workshop with the superintendent last month. He definitely did receive our message and seems to be genuinely taking it to heart. On this topic, the superintendent stressed that he expects and desires for NSSED to continue to be viewed as a vital partner with its member districts, providing outstanding support to students. He reported that the NSSED administrative team is, quote, committed to preparing a budget which will allow for the continuation of outstanding programs and services to all member districts, regardless of District 112's decision regarding membership. In the event District 112 does withdraw at the beginning of the 2015-16 school year, the NSSED administration will budget in a way that will have minimal to no impact on the remaining member districts, unquote. He clarified this statement. He expects no increase in our membership fee as a result of the 112 departure, and he suggested that we may even see a 10% reduction in the membership fee going forward. It's important to note the membership fee is not the large amount that we pay. It's currently about $27,000. No timeline or details on what structural changes might be occurring was provided, but the gist of his statement was confirmed by other members of the exec committee. So that's a positive. One last related item. At our workshop last month, a question had been asked about how any outstanding debt was handled in the case of a member district withdrawing from NSSED. So if District 112 does depart, are they responsible for some portion of the debt on the books? The answer is that NSSED does not actually have any long-term debt on their books. They did a construction project a number of years back, but that's fully paid off, so that is not an issue. I'll continue to monitor the progress of the financial restructuring at NSSED and report back with more details as they become available, but I do feel much more comfortable with where their admin team is headed on the topic than I was a few months ago. And I believe we've achieved much of what we had hoped to accomplish, at least for the time being, largely as a result from our recent meeting with the NSSED superintendent, particularly as it relates to the need to improve the cost structure of NSSED. That concludes the NSSED report, and I'm happy to take any questions from the board or member of the public regarding this report.
Seeing none. Thank you very much for your report, Mike. Next report is, next liaison report is Ed Red, and filling in for your board president this month will be Rob Lemke.
Thanks, Bill. I've been asked to update the board on the ramifications of SB 1, which concerns state pension reform for the state of Illinois. Governor Quinn signed State Bill 1 on Thursday, December 5th. The bill is aimed at addressing the state's large pension deficit by changing the benefit structure of current and future retirees. The bill is expected to save the state $160 billion over the next 30 years. There are three things of which the board and our district should be most aware. First, the bill changes the value of the teachers' retirement system for our current and future teachers and administrators. It is almost certain that the financial reward to teaching and administrating in public schools will be reduced because of these changes. The long-run ramifications in terms of hiring teachers and administrators for District 67 remains to be seen, though one could easily make the argument that hiring talented teachers and administrators into the district, especially from other states, is going to become more difficult. Second, the bill signed by Governor Quinn does not address the cost shift issue. That is, the bill does not require districts to start paying new monies into the retirement system. However, it is important to note that the bill also does not prevent this change from happening in the future. Rather, the bill quite simply remains quiet on the issue. It seems likely that a future bill will include a cost shift to further address the state's pension shortfall, but it also seems likely that instead of gradually increasing the cost from almost nothing today to as much as 5 or 6 percentage points in the future, a better prediction might be that the cost shift will increase by a half percentage point each year for 5 years. Down the road, therefore, the cost shift is likely to be somewhere around 2.5 percentage points in total. District 67's 5-year projections therefore continue to budget in a 0.5 percentage point increase for each of the next 5 years. And third, SB 1 is certain to be challenged in court. So, unless Jen has more to add, the board will be updated on further developments as new information becomes available.
Thank you, Rob. Are there questions?
No, I'm not taking questions.
He doesn't have to answer my question, but I do have a question. Thank you, Rob. Could someone maybe address, I don't know if it would be Jennifer or Mike, from everything that I've read, it seems very likely that this will be overturned. Am I correct? And can we just speak maybe a little bit about that?
I'd be happy to speculate wildly on that, which is about what you have to do. There are parts of it that are very likely to be overturned. In particular, Jen, jump in here. There is an explicit, it is written into the Illinois Constitution that a diminution of a pension is, you can't go there. It's a property right. And that is part of the deal. It's a significant part of the deal. That's where part of the savings comes from. So that is the first thing that I would think would be on the radar as being overturned. Jen, why don't you jump in and add to that or other things?
Yeah, we do see there are several issues, obviously. I think I may have been quoted as it's a hot mess. But one of them being, obviously, we think there are constitutionality issues. The professional organizations that we're affiliated with are of that same mindset. We also think there are some issues potentially with some IRS regulations and related to Social Security. And that has to do with how the law currently has the CPI indexing. It's 0.5% of CPI index for your cost of living adjustment, which could potentially push it out of some of those exemptions of Social Security. So I think there's some groups looking into that specifically. There's also some question around, even with the reduction of the 9.4% contribution that teachers and other certified staff currently pay into the system, it's reducing from 9.4% to 8.4%. The question of, are they now overpaying for? Are they now paying into a system at a higher rate than which they will eventually draw benefits? So I think that's a third piece that clearly is going to need some research into whether or not something like that could stick. That same issue currently exists, by the way, right now for Tier 2 individuals, for which that pension system or that pension benefit had already changed. So that now is an issue in both Tier 1 and Tier 2. So yes, there are definitely some pieces that I would be highly surprised if they stayed.
There's a great deal of speculation on which parts might be overturned, and then the timing is highly suspect because it's the vote took place immediately after the primary registration. And then the question about re-election chances play into that, and which parts get overturned. There's a great deal of conversation of people that have been around Springfield for a while saying that they expect that the cost shift will take place in the future, and that is notably absent in this bill, with an anticipation that the parts of it will be considered, will be declared unconstitutional, which will then make a shifting of the responsibility, financial responsibility, not the legislature's doing, but the court's doing.
Thank you, Rob. Next liaison report, in fact, the next three are from Lesley Fisher, first being the Curriculum Coordinating Committee.
Okay, thank you, Bill. The Curriculum Coordinating Committee met on Thursday, December 5th, and we are led by Lauren Fagel and Lori Wilcox, who tag team to discuss the ELA materials adoption timeline, as well as an update on bridges and the staff development therein. First, regarding the ELA, that's English Language Arts Materials Adoption Timeline, the ELA adoption is to adopt a new set of primary resources and to schedule staff development that will be ongoing as these new set of primary resources are implemented. It's important to note that the language arts teachers are working very closely with the social studies teachers, that they are very involved in the process, working together to select these primary resources. There have been many opportunities for the language arts and social studies teachers to participate in the material adoption in order to have ownership, which we have discussed at this meeting and many others that you go to, which is the key to the success of any implementation. Tied to that was the discussion of the update on bridges, which is our math program that we have implemented fully in the past year. Math teachers, some of which who were present at this meeting, recall that this is the first time they remember a change being so good, that the program has had staff ownership, that the professional development led by Janice Heigl has been great, and that the kids are succeeding. So we are halfway, half years into this full implementation of Bridges K through 4, and the results have been great thus far. In addition, we discussed that a programmatic review of special education from an outside source will occur in the district in January. It will be a 3-day review, and the results will be shared with the board in February. Thank you very much.
Questions from board members?
Did Lauren and Lori want to add anything? Okay. And the best news of all is that the Spirit of 67 Foundation had a party this past month, and the APT meeting, Allison CK president, decided that it was busy for everyone and that there would be no meeting. So no reports from those two. I will say one thing, a little plug for the Spirit of 67. If you are a Spirit of 67 donor and you received a card that says you're a Spirit of 67 member and you're shopping throughout town during these last days before the holidays, use your card because you get a great discount, and a lot of the stores are participating, and a portion of that money goes back to the Spirit. So I encourage you to check your card, and really if you're shopping locally, chances are you'll get a great deal and you'll be able to benefit the Spirit at the same time. Thank you.
Thank you, Lesley. That concludes our liaison reports. We now move to our action items. The first one being acceptance of the 2013. Excuse me, I'm going to, our first report, I'm going to call on Mike Simic to introduce.
All right, I'd like to thank folks in Dr. Weimer and Mrs. Jackson and Mr. Cardamone for being patient in the back, and a number of board members, and also Mr. Schuler, a number of board members, teachers, and administrators. See Mrs. Glacianos in the back as well, and participated in a trip. I can't see who is behind Mrs. Whipple, so okay, Mrs. Weaver, there she is. Participated in an exchange of ideas in China, and they have a presentation that they would like to share with us, so I look forward to that. Come on up.
We're just going to show some pictures of our journeys as we talk. So, good evening. First, we'd like to thank you for allowing us the opportunity to come and share with you our takeaways from our recent trip to China. We'd also like to share our appreciation with the board for all of those who made the trip possible, including those who helped support in our buildings in our absence, and those who made travel arrangements and ensured we had the appropriate documents so we were able to successfully travel with minimum turbulence. We feel privileged to have been able to learn about a different culture and to have had an experience that opened our minds to new perspectives. We are looking forward to sharing these perspectives with all of our students and to using our newly gained insight to encourage global awareness and understanding among all District 67 students. The Chinese Bridge delegation was a one-week program for U.S. educators in China, sponsored by the Confucius Institute headquarters, also known as Hanban, and was also organized by the College Board. Many of the 381 delegates were there to improve or initiate their Mandarin language programming for their school districts. We had several representatives from Lake Forest, both District 67 and 115, travel as part of the delegation. They included Dr. Weimer, myself, Mr. Cardamone, Mrs. Weaver, who's a second grade teacher at Cherokee, Mrs. Glacianos, who is a first grade teacher at Cherokee, Mr. Schuler, and from District 115, Mr. Bergner, Mr. Schreiber, Mr. Sullivan, who is a teacher at the high school, and Mr. DeRosa, who is a teacher at the high school as well.
We want to talk a little bit about, just starting off with, really the purpose of the personnel and the purpose of us going on this trip. And really the purpose was to deepen our cultural understanding and to broaden our perspectives on the world. I think when we were all leaving and planning to go on this trip, really didn't know what to fully expect. And I think we all came away with wonderful takeaways that lend itself to much more than we expected. Really had an opportunity to build relationships with Chinese schools that could offer both District 67 students and teachers the opportunity to share across cultures and languages. We had a great opportunity to network with United States educators who share our common goals, as I believe over 13 states were represented in this delegation. We had an opportunity to see educational systems firsthand in China and really see what our similarities are and where we can continue to grow and where we are very progressive and ahead of the game. And really had an opportunity to represent District 67 as leaders in global education, whether those were as a leader being presented about implementing the immersion programs, as Kelly Jackson did at a very large forum, presenting to the entire delegation about our experiences in Tianjin, which was the province that our group from Lake Forest traveled to, which Dr. Weimer had an opportunity to do that for our whole group. And then also to share reflections from Educational Forum with the delegates and Chinese representatives, which I think we were very proud of our Lake Forest contingency because pretty much everybody from our group all had an opportunity to share and talk about education in the United States and how it compares to China. So it was a very, very wonderful process for all of us.
And we thought it would be helpful to tell you, to give you a glimpse of what a day looked like for us during our trip. A typical day would be, we would be up and ready to go at 7 in the morning and often didn't return to our hotel until 8 o'clock. So our hosts, the College Board and Hanban Institute, really maximized our stay there so that we could learn and observe the most amount that we could in one day. We typically visited 2 schools in a day. We also had intermittent opportunities for cultural experiences, which you can see on some of these slides. We were able to visit some key historical sites as well as look at some state-of-the-art facilities in various towns in China. And our school visits were arranged in small groups, medium-sized groups, and some venues we were actually in fairly large groups. And we were usually met by administrators and teachers, and student ambassadors gave us tours of college campuses. We were able to sit in on actual classrooms and watch teachers teaching students and watching students working on their coursework. And we also had the pleasure of viewing a lot of student cultural and artistic performances. And we embedded within each school experience were wonderful opportunities to sit down face to face and talk with administrators, teachers, and even students. We had a lot of opportunities to meet with student groups, to ask them questions, and what we appreciated was open, meaningful, two-way dialogue, which we would welcome opportunities for that in various countries around the world that have strong educational systems. We felt like we had fruitful conversations, and it ignited a lot of thought and dialogue between the two parties, so it was nice. Now we're going to talk about some of our takeaways from the trip. And the first major one that I heard echoed time and time again through talking to people from Lake Forest that went on the trip, as well as just in our casual conversations on the bus, was that we are more similar than we are different. I think as different as our cultures are, we were continually astounded by, oh, that's really close to how we do that in our own district or in our own country. And the major thing that I think that we all came together around is that we all want the best for our students, no matter where we are across the globe. That we are also similar in some of the initiatives that China is looking at toward implementing in their educational system. For example, teaching of the whole child and focusing on interests and things beyond math and reading and science and social studies. But we saw classes where students were partaking in art or doing art, and where students were doing origami and yoga and a lot of interest-based activities, and they could choose. Another area of focus for the Chinese government, which I think is also something that we in the United States are focusing on, is the creating opportunities for all students. And specifically in China, they're looking at the balance between rural and urban opportunities. And we also look at that here in the United States and making sure that we provide opportunities for our students that are in rural areas that are similar to those in urban areas. Another focus for schools in China is professional development and ensuring that their teachers are well credentialed and well educated in order to continually move their students forward. And that's a focus that we experience daily here in District 67.
Additionally, I think something that really stood out to us was that teachers learning from teachers is greatly encouraged. And that's something that we definitely value in our buildings, value in our district, and those opportunities for really teachers to learn from one another. The schools that we encountered and the schools that we went to have very strong mentor-teacher programs as well, which again is, I think, a very strong similarity to our programming here in our district. And something that really stood out to me, and you'll see it hopefully as you kind of go through the slideshow, with that idea of teachers learning from teachers, that idea of the open classroom, and that idea of kind of breaking down those walls, and the idea that we can all learn from one another, all of our students, as opposed to being isolated to a specific classroom or a specific wing of a building. There's a chalkboard that you'll see at some point through the slideshow that was literally an open door policy. It was teachers would come out there this was the school that I went to visit when we were broken up into the provinces and different schools in the province of Tianjin, and it was basically it was a welcoming mat. It was, here's the lesson that I'm going to be teaching, here's the date and time that I'm going to be teaching it, and there could be as many as 8 to 20 other teachers coming into a classroom just to really learn from another educator, another teacher at the school. So it was just something very powerful that I thought was something that, we're looking to obviously continue to grow. And that's that idea of just, we do a great job with it already and continue to grow with that idea of, opening up our classrooms to all.
Another unique opportunity that was embedded in our journey was also going to universities. We went to Tianjin Normal University and Remini University in Beijing, and it gave us an opportunity again to have an educational forum where we could talk with other principals, talk with other teachers, but also hear from some prominent educators regionally and nationally about some of the main educational initiatives in China. And we also, when we were touring schools, we were taking a lot of notes, soaking a lot in, and saw that schools devote quite a lot of attention to the history of that school. And there were, in some cases, in one school that I visited, a whole building that was a museum, a historical museum for that school. So what was nice is part of that was honoring educators, but also honoring alumni that went there. And in one school that we went into a gymnasium, and there were 2 banners hanging on each side of the gym. And of course, it was in Mandarin, so we needed it interpreted. But one side it said, "Today I am proud of my school." And on the other side it was, "Tomorrow my school will be proud of me." And that's an example of the takeaways that resonate with educators, regardless of what country you're in, what language people are speaking. Those are the kind of things that we take away and we think deeply about and converse about. And how does that relate to enhancing what we do here in the United States? The other thing was, as Kelly mentioned, a lot of club classes, which were a lot of cultural classes that were artistic, but also we saw a lot of innovation with one of the schools that I went to, a high school, has a life sciences research lab, and kids were actively engaged in research under the direction of their instructor. And it's research that they have published, it's research that they apply to conferences and present at. There's also some aerospace classes and things like that that were interesting to see what types of things the students are gravitating to outside of their core classes. We also saw a lot of language instruction. The students were pretty conversive in English. They also were taking French and Spanish and some other classes as well. So that was interesting to see how they fit that into their weekly schedule.
While there were similarities, there were definitely some differences that we noticed as we toured the schools. One marked difference that we noticed immediately upon walking into several classrooms was the amount of students in a classroom to a teacher. Many classrooms that we observed had 40 to 50 to even some classrooms bordering 60 students in one classroom with one teacher. So in many cases, it was silent. So you didn't have the any classroom management issues with that large of a group. And I think that just speaks to the respect for educators and respect for education that we found so prevalent. Another difference that we saw was that education is required from ages 6 through 15, and there are very high stakes exams that students take for high schools, and it's very competitive. We went to visit many key schools, which were top performing schools where students had to take very difficult entrance exams, to get into the school, and parents pay for that education. And one thing, as we look at differences, we look at things that we do and take away new perspectives and continually ask questions, such as special education. We are very inclusive in our school buildings and in our district, and we did not have the opportunity to visit special education schools that are present in China. And also, the classes themselves are very heavily tracked, so there is that kind of separation between students, and the schools themselves, I think, because of the high stakes exams, are also tracked, where they have the key schools for the highest performing students, and then there's other schools that follow suit.
Just sort of some final reflections is really that it's really exciting to think about what all this means for our students in our district. We look forward to beginning to establish partnerships with educators and continuing to grow partnerships with educators that even started on this week-long journey together that we met and continue to meet from near and from far. As we move forward, these relationships will provide our students with unique opportunities to deepen their learning and understandings of cultural similarities and differences as they prepare for their future in a dynamic world that is increasingly getting smaller. So thank you very much for giving us an opportunity to share a little bit about our experiences. And we're wanting to open this up if there are any questions from the board that you would like to ask of us, or Rick, or Dave, who was on the trip with us. Or
Yeah, Mike, or Tom, I have a question. We pulled 3 administrators and 2 teachers out for 6 days. What tangible outcomes and next steps come from this trip relative to positively affecting the kids in District 67?
I think one thing that's really, I can speak specifically to Deer Path. I can speak specifically to a connection that I've had is an opportunity to create a global partnership. A school that we had an opportunity to visit has actually already reached out to me directly as of this morning about the idea of opening up sister school opportunity. This is obviously a much larger process to begin to even explore, but looking at those opportunities for cross-cultural education opportunities, possibly in the future, teacher exchange, student exchange, building something much larger. But I think, what we were able to take away is, especially as our programs, our immersion program, not only through Mandarin, but all of our language programs continue to evolve and move forward into the upper grade levels, I think is a wonderful opportunity for us, for me in particular, to really see what other opportunities are there for us to really develop those questions and those relationships that we might not have otherwise had. Also, I think just for us as administrators and for teachers moving forward, having the opportunity to really meet with some educators from other school districts, from other states that either may be into an immersion program, learning a little bit more with the high school piece about an AP Mandarin program moving forward. I think just the opportunity of different evolvements of current programming that we have and making connections not strictly across the country, but as close to our friends to the north up in Wisconsin or in Minnesota, other schools that are also involved in this. I don't know if you wanted to answer that.
I'll just echo what Tom said about creating dialogue between other programs that are present in the United States and learning from them. I had the opportunity to present about beginning an immersion program in the elementary school and presented with two other educators one from Oregon, I believe, and one from, or it may have been California, and one from Utah, where the whole state has adopted a world language initiative. And so we also had dialogue about kind of struggles that we have seen, and I made a comment just kind of about some of the things that are facing Cherokee and specifically, and the other administrator that was there said, oh, we could talk for days about this, and we will. So just forming those partnerships and learning from other people's experience is a definite result of this experience.
Somewhat tied in with Jeff's question, was there any practices, best practices, worst practices that you saw that you may bring back to the schools, near term? Is there anything like that?
Best practices with respect to education in China, or best practices with respect to conversations with other educators in the United States?
Yes.
I think with respect to the education in China, some of the things that they are doing, offering students choice and offering students opportunities for interest-based learning, those are things definitely that we were impressed with, and that we said, oh, that would be a really neat class to offer, or something great to try. There is a focus on social emotional education that we also are working toward. With respect to other schools, I think I'm trying to think of something specific that other than just having kind of the initial dialogue, but really looking at schools specifically that have one strand of an immersion program within a whole building, and how that has worked for them, and schools that have had it for a longer period of time. I think it's a continuous dialogue that needs to happen with specific questions and answers, which our time period did not allow for at that time, but it's definitely something that I want to pursue.
Thank you.
Yes.
I'll give a little different answer from a board member's perspective. I definitely learned a lot observing the classrooms and the principals and the teachers in Beijing. But in addition to that, I probably learned more from spending time with our own teachers and our own principals. As a board member, we're asked a lot of us. We're asked to look at a lot of different things, to have opinions, to oversee a lot. And I gained far more from being with our own people over these days than I've gotten in 2.5 years. I hear them speak to the Chinese. I hear them speak amongst themselves, ideas. I ask them a lot of questions. I just learned a lot, and I think it helps me with my role as a board member a lot.
What I learned also is that don't race Rick Schuler up to the top of the Great Wall of China, because he will smoke everybody that's there. Just thought I'd point that out.
He's mean and lean. I'd like to, if I could, Mrs. Glacianos and Mrs. Weaver, I'd like to, it just goes back to my days in the classroom where if somebody hasn't spoken yet, they get called on. Right, you're hiding in the back. But you two are partner teachers in Mandarin classes, and I'd be really interested to hear how that has affected you and your work since you got back, and any sort of speculation you might have about how it might affect your work in the future. And to give you another moment to think here, if you want to gather your thoughts, the reason I ask this is because you teach current kids in our school district, and the impact that this has on you directly affects the children that you serve.
I think Lisa and I have talked a lot about it, and feel free to jump in. The biggest thing, as Ingrid, Tom, and Kelly said, that if we were going to take one thing away, was when you look at the partnerships that they've developed across the world, from the young children in the elementary schools to the high schools, to be able to establish those partnerships and give our students, even our young kindergarten, first and second graders, those opportunities of cultural learning and understanding, it's really exciting to think about giving them, all students, that unique opportunity, whether it's looking at countries all across the world. And that was most impressionable to me, and I look forward to building those partnerships and be able to give our students those opportunities. It was wonderful for us to do that, and to be able to give them that opportunity that I didn't have when I was growing up. You know, as we look at how much our world is changing, and we talked about how we thought we were going on the other side of the world, and we felt like it was just like you flipped a switch and you got off and you realized how similar we were and how close we are, and to give them those opportunities.
And that 12-hour flight was really, I was thinking it was going to be so long and I'd be in such a different place, and it was not that long, and when we got there it was so similar. I felt so much more connected to understand the culture and the awareness from the people that we met, and it was an incredible experience.
Thank you for the opportunity and for giving us this time to share our big takeaway.
And we're really gracious that you value this opportunity for us. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all very much for your presentation. The next item on our agenda is the 2013 audit. Originally, this had been on the consent agenda to accept, and we asked it to be placed on the main agenda and have the auditors come. However, they weren't available at the last minute, so we are going to table this until January. Is there any discussion or comment? Rick is smiling. They were only here for 4 hours on Friday, but I wanted them to come back, and maybe they had their Christmas party tonight. I don't know.
Mr. Anderson? Mr. Anderson, I think we may need a motion to
I'm
table.
getting there.
I move we table the review of the audit.
Bill, there's no legal timing requirements like there is for other things relative to acceptance.
We checked on that, and there appears not to be. In fact, District 115 is doing it in January also. So I wondered about that as well. May I have a motion to table the 2013 audit until the January board meeting?
I move we table the audit discussion until January.
What? We're tabling the acceptance of the...
Yes.
Okay. May I have...
Excuse me, just so we're clear, the audit discussion that you're referring to is the audit discussion that we went through during the Finance Committee meeting, correct? When the auditors were there? No.
Yes.
Well, the discussion is, but I think there's an official time when the board accepts the audit. And that's what we're officially tabling. We can have a discussion on our own if y'all want, or we could do it next month when the... Yeah, you've done that, okay. So I think we're just tabling the acceptance. I'm going to start over. May I have a motion to table the 2013 acceptance of the audit until the January board meeting?
So moved.
A second.
Second.
May I have a roll call vote, please, Madam Clerk?
Aye.
Mr. Folker?
Aye.
Mrs. Clemmensen?
Aye.
Mrs. Fisher?
Aye.
Mr. Lemke?
Aye.
Mr. Borkowski?
Aye.
Mr. Anderson?
Aye.
Have consent.
Right. The next item on the agenda is adoption of the 2013 tax levy. We've had some discussion of that in the Finance Committee, but I'd turn it over to Rick for a minute to see if there's any other comments or want to invite further discussion.
I'm pretty sure nobody wants more comments from me. If anybody has questions, we're glad to address them.
Well, as I mentioned before, we've had a very thorough discussion of the levy. A lot of board members have been involved. However, we can always try and have a more inclusive process and everything. Is there anyone here who'd like to make a comment on the levy?
I just have a question on the timing issue. We did the tentative levy at the last meeting. This is for the adoption of the recommended levy. But is there an option to do any further changes or amendments to the amount and to the levy later on before it's, quote, final?
Yes.
If you ignore what they're actually called, yes. By process, by law, we have to adopt a tentative levy, and you have to do that 20 days prior to adopting a final levy, which is, we did the tentative levy in November. The final levy is on for December today. And you have to file those before the last Tuesday in December, which is December 31st. So there's really three milestones at that point. We will have an opportunity, we will receive, because the levy contains formulas based on information we don't yet know, like the final EAV of the district, final new construction figures for the district. We will receive those from the county, typically spring break-ish, maybe end of March, and between the end of March and the end of April. We have a 5-day window once we receive those numbers to adjust them either among funds, or we could adjust down our extension at that point once the amount becomes known. We'll have further discussion, I think, on the 5-year now that we've spent 4 hours going through the baseline, and we'll have to work on I Survived 4-hour finance meeting t-shirts or something. So there will be an ongoing discussion of that nature. If the board were to want to take a further action or give a further direction, the 5-day window, since we don't know when that is going to arrive, that actually arrives by fax, that would need to be done sometime between February and March at the latest. Because once we get the 5 days, we don't have time to post a meeting to get that further direction.
And Jeff, my understanding, I looked into this today and actually spoke to our council. There is some importance in their view to us passing a levy before the end of the year. If we don't, and I don't like these kind of extreme statements, but there were 2 lawyers on the phone, and this is what they said. And by the way, they're the board's lawyer, not the district's. You could potentially be in a position where we couldn't levy anything next year if we don't do this by the end of this year, which would obviously be a setback to the district. So I see our discussion, which Rick has started and facilitated, continuing well into the first quarter. I have some information I've requested, and they've prepared a report, which I'd like to share with the board. And I think there's a lot of other people who'd like to have this discussion, and it's the right discussion to have. But I think it's also the right thing to do right now to pass a levy so we keep the doors open next year.
No, I agree. I just, a lot of the things we've been discussing, not that you're not getting the cart out before the horse, but the mission and vision process, I think, will help set a direction that a lot of this would fall. If timing were perfect, we'd be doing that first, and then we'd be in a position to say, this is what we want to do, so here's how much we're going to need, and so forth, more cohesively.
Agreed.
But yes, I agree with your perspective.
I agree with what Mr. Folker just said, and I also thought our community member asked a very valid question about, an analysis of costs and other things. So I know I personally don't feel like I have a good handle on exactly what the game plan is moving forward, and I have some unanswered questions.
I think I'll make a comment on the levy as well. When the maximum levy was initially requested a few months ago, I certainly was one of a number of people who pushed back pretty hard on that request. And at the time, I felt that there was really no rationale that was provided why we were asking for more money. Lacking that rationale, I did not feel it was appropriate to really be requesting any additional money. And I want to give the administrative team credit. I think they heard that concern. I voiced it as well as others, and did come back at the meeting that Rick referred to and presented or started to present a plan where the additional money does actually add value to the students and not just fill the district's coffers even fuller. I think Rick covered many aspects of the plan earlier. I do think it needs to be more thoroughly fine-tuned, vetted by the Education Committee, and hopefully that conversation does continue in January. But it was rationale, which is what I was looking for. In the spirit of transparency, I want to recognize that the district's fund balance is currently, in my opinion, significantly overfunded. It is significantly over the board policy. The District 67 board policy calls for a fund balance in the range of 10% of the operational expenses. And if we simply asked for this tax increase and kept our expenses constant, which isn't reality, but if we did that, the projected fund balance approaches 18%, which is well over the 10% policy and beyond what I feel is appropriate for our taxpayers. Having said that, I do believe in the value-added educational plan that was presented. And I think there's a number of ways that the fund balance can be used to really advance those initiatives, whether that be the traditional funding or a more creative solution, taking a close look at our debt service and how the debt service potentially could be reduced to free up what might be called sustainable ongoing dollars versus one-time dollars from the fund balance. That's clearly not a conversation for tonight, but I do hope we have that conversation in January. So to summarize, I did have my doubts. I'm in support of what we're going to be voting on tonight, and I really hope that we continue the detailed conversations in January.
Thank you. Thank you, Mike. Comments from others? Hearing none, may I have a motion to approve to adopt the 2013 tax levy?
So moved.
May I have a second? Not everybody at once.
Second.
May I have a roll call, Madam Clerk?
Mrs. Clemmensen?
Aye.
Mr. Lemke?
Aye.
Mr. Anderson?
Aye.
Mr. Folker?
Aye.
Mr. Borkowski?
Aye.
Mr. Schuler?
Aye.
Mrs. Fisher?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda is approval of the mission, vision, and goals contract. Board members, that is in your packet. Beth Clemmensen has presented on this a number of times. She's done a remarkable job developing this project, and this is really that has come to fruition. Oh, I apologize. I'm sorry. And I would like to introduce Shani to talk about the mission, vision, goals project. Thank you.
My name is Shani Harmon. I'm the managing partner of the transformation team, which is the organization that proposes to work with you on the development of a vision. And what I'd like to do, I assume all of you had a chance to review the proposal. Beth has probably read it 45 times. What I'd like to do is just 3 quick things. Provide an overview of the project so that as you make a decision about whether to go forward, you have good information. The second is address any questions you might have. And the third is give you a chance to get to know me, since I would be working closely with you over the next 4 months to get this work complete. I'd like to start by just telling you a little bit about why I'm here. First, I'm a proud product of public education in Hyco, West Virginia, which no one has ever heard of until one of our sons was on X Factor and came in 4th, and my high school was on TV. So I'm pretty excited about that, and that was just last week. The second is that I got a joint master's in education and MBA because I believe that education is the best way actually to drive change. And whenever you have a vision, and I've worked with many organizations to achieve their vision, there's change required to actually abandon what is current and true for you and actually pursue something new and even better. And I think that education is essential to that. So it feels like there's great alignment between what I believe in and what you're up to. Thirdly, that's what my practice is all about. Leaders who want to do something big and need a little facilitation to kind of get the conversation moving in the right direction. The way that I do consulting is really about helping you find your answer, creating conditions in which it's easy to explore and think together about where you're going as opposed to telling you the answer. Despite the credentials I shared, I don't consider myself an expert in education at all, and that's not what I bring to this process. I bring facilitation expertise. Finally, sadly, I do not live on the North Shore. I live in Bucktown, but I feel like I'm almost a resident, this is my 4th day here in 2 weeks. So in terms of this project, what we're up to is really trying to create a context in which you can easily explore the possibilities for what is it possible to achieve in Lake Forest in the next 7 to 10 years. What are we up to? What's that big goal? And from that, really create a vision, but also, importantly, a strategic plan. And the strategic plan will say, what is the sequence of moves that we want to make over that time frame in order to get there? One of the things that I've heard in some early conversations with folks is just that there's a lot going on. You have a lot of ideas, you have a lot of initiatives, and this will help sequence those to say what first and why, and how do we focus our collective attention. And finally, this becomes another opportunity to really strengthen relationships between the constituents in Lake Forest. You'll see that some of it is about conversations among yourselves, but it's also importantly about conversations with the community to kind of say, where do we want to go together? It's their children, your schools. How do we all come together with a shared vision? So that's the goals for the project. I'm driven by a framework that says if you want to help people move together towards something big, what are the elements that you need? I always say there's 5 things. You need clarity on where you're starting, so the shared reality. You need a vision that is inspiring and tangible, so we can all say this is what it looks like and feels like if we get there. You need a roadmap that lays out a set of evolutionary milestones. That's all great. What's it going to look like as we achieve it? What's our path? Integrated initiatives is simply referring to the idea that there will be work that is created through this process. In what order and how are we going to get that work done? And finally, an engagement process. So this isn't something that has been designed to go in a room and create an answer, but it's actually about iterative conversations where we kind of find our way there together. And finally, let me just give you a quick view of what the process would look like. There's an exploration phase, which involves one-on-one interviews with 20 members of the board, the staff, the principals, the community, who have a point of view on where this district should go. Also an exploration of sort of what's the best thinking out there. That's all kind of resident. It's just about bringing it together. It would culminate in a one-day working session with the board and some of those invited members, probably in late January, to really kind of say, this is the vision that we're creating together. And then, as I think you're aware, we've proposed to do this in parallel process with District 115, which approved this project last week, so that after those parallel independent processes, we could come together and say, is there a unified vision for this district that we can articulate, or do they actually need to be slightly different? We will figure that out together. And then the second phase is really about community engagement. So once you have a draft vision and a strategic plan that kind of says, here's how we'll evolve to get there, facilitating dialogues between you and the community, you and the faculty of the schools, to sort of get their contribution and refinement to that, so that we would emerge at the end of March with a vision and a strategic plan that everyone in the community feels good about. That is our plan. Are there any questions I can answer for you?
I have a question. And I apologize, there was a big crowd here earlier, but I don't know if you heard the presentation on Mandarin and everything.
I did, yes.
When you look at a program like that, how do you sort of think about that and how it fits into a long-term vision for a district or not? Or are you sort of looking above that level? Or?
I think it's both. I think that it would be this board and community will have to wrestle with what is the role of world languages in your vision. Obviously, it's been a big component, and obviously there's a lot of energy around it. And I think that it will behoove us to integrate the LASIC work into the process that we're going through together. So it'll be partially my job to kind of get smart about that. I know you're all deeply familiar with it, but then really sort of, I hope that the vision process says, what is the role of world language in our future? And that will be part of the umbrella that people need to kind of understand, how does this all fit in? Was it a whimsical idea, or is it part of a big path that we're on together?
Thanks for your patience waiting for us.
Thank you very much.
I do have one question. When you were at the high school board meeting this past week, and there was the assessment report preceded your presentation, and one of the things that grew out of that was a question about your path and what brought you to this place. You were a recipient of some unusual opportunities given where you happen to grow up. I think that's really a compelling story, if you wouldn't mind telling that.
Sure, thank you. So as I mentioned, I'm from Clifftop, West Virginia, population well, it's about 10 now. And I went to a public high school that is on the verge of being shut down because of population declines. But when I was there, you know, it was kind of your average underfunded West Virginia high school. And I was on, you know, your typical path to West Virginia University, which gives a full ride to valedictorians in the state of West Virginia, very generously. And there was a nonprofit organization that got interested in education being a source of change for mountain cultures around the world, and they picked West Virginia as one of their sites. And so they invited a junior from every high school in the state to participate in a weekend symposium about college, and offered you an opportunity to join their summer program, which involved 12 of us on a mountaintop for a month writing 100 pages about our life as the basis for our college applications. As part of that, they threw us in a van and they drove us to New England and said, you need to see what college is like. So they took us to Columbia, to Drew, to Princeton, and to Boston, where we went to all the schools, and I fell in love with Harvard. And that organization actually said, you're a geographic minority, that's going to be really good for you, and we can actually help you get your path there. And because of that, you know, there's my commitment to education, right? It changes the course of my life. I'm certainly here because of that moment, and because I believe so much in what it can do for all children, no matter where they live.
One of the things we've been talking about is trying to do more outreach as a board to the community, and maybe like town hall meetings and things like that. Does this process involve any of those specific sort of board interactions with the community?
It does. Actually, entire phase 2 is really about connecting with the community, sharing this draft vision. We haven't devised all of the mechanisms that we could use. Perhaps there's an online place where people can comment, but also conversations where you can have dialogues. It might be town hall luncheon kind of things. I mean, there's a wide range of mechanisms that we can use, and we'll sort of try to get a feel for how much energy people have for being engaged and give them as many opportunities as possible.
Thank you.
One of the things we found in going through this process is that what seemed to be fairly straightforward when we first started got more and more complex as we peeled sort of each layer of the onion. And I feel so fortunate that we were able to find Shani, because as we realized that there were all these different pieces coming together, you know, how can we bring innovation to the party? How can we bring facilitation to the party? How can we bring community engagement to the party? Shani just kind of checked all the boxes, and you can see we have she has outlined a very thorough process that works collaboratively with the other school district, works collaboratively with our community, with our teachers, and I'm really, you know, pleased that she was able to share it with you tonight.
Thank you so much.
Could I ask one more question?
Of course.
I mean, could you talk about how you think about integrating visions between two districts? Because we're sort of like cousins or something like that. It would make sense to have a unified sort of vision, but, you know, and a lot of things we coordinate on, other things not as much. And how do you think about going about that?
What we find when we do kind of lots of, I've done processes like these a number of times, that when you get kind of to the fundamentals, many people have very similar beliefs, and that if you can focus on the sort of commonalities, you can also often find things that people have a lot of heart for that really matters and that actually does integrate. That would be sort of my guess about how this is going to play out. So it's really about listening and hearing kind of both what is distinct but also what is common. It could be that it's more about, you know, how 67 bridges into 115 and what does that kind of look like. So I don't have really the answers. I just have sort of experience and faith that, you know, you're all talking about how you educate your children, so there's probably a lot that's common there. And if it turns out it's not, I think we decided it was very important to run parallel independent processes so that each district could kind of find its own voice. And if they can't be integrated, that's a fine outcome too.
That's okay too. Good. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
With that, may I have a motion to approve the Mission Vision Goals contract as presented?
I would like to enthusiastically move that we approve the contract.
Second.
We never get that for the copier renewal. May I have a, sorry. May I have a roll call, please, Madam Clerk?
Mr. Borkowski?
Aye.
Mr. Lemke?
Aye.
Mrs. Clemmensen?
Aye.
Mr. Anderson?
Aye.
Mrs. Fisher?
Aye.
Mr. Schuler?
Aye.
Mr. Folker?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Great. We're looking forward to working with you on this. Thank you. The next item on the agenda is the approval of the Human Resources Report. Mr. Simic.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. I recommend that the Human Resources Report be approved as presented.
May I have a motion to approve the Human Resources Report as presented?
So moved.
May I have a second?
Second.
May I have a roll call vote, please, Madam Clerk?
Mr. Lemke?
Aye.
Mr. Borkowski?
Aye.
Mr. Schuler?
Aye.
Mrs. Clemmensen?
Aye.
Mr. Anderson?
Aye.
Mrs. Fisher?
Aye.
Mr. Folker?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Next on the agenda is the consent agenda items, which include the approval of Allied Flex carryover, disbursements, payrolls, and financial statements, minutes of a regular meeting from November 19th, minutes of an executive session from November 19th, and disposal of audio recordings from March 20th, 2012. May I have a motion? Are there any items on the consent agenda which a board member would like removed for further discussion? Hearing none. May I have a motion to approve the consent agenda items?
So moved.
May I have a second?
Second?
May I have a roll call vote, please?
Mr. Folker?
Aye.
Mr. Schuler?
Aye.
Mrs. Clemmensen?
Aye.
Mrs. Fisher?
Aye.
Mr. Lemke?
Aye.
Mr. Borkowski?
Aye.
Mr. Anderson?
Aye.
Motion carries.
We have one FOIA request from Ms. Nancy Thorner of Lake Bluff, Illinois. Announcements. Monday, December 23rd is winter break. Monday, or January 6th, 2014, school reopens. The next District 67 Board of Education meeting is scheduled for January 28th, 2013 at Lake Forest West Campus Boardroom. May I have a motion to adjourn this meeting of the Lake Forest District 67 Board of Education?
Yes,
So
you
moved.
may. So moved.
May I have a second?
Second.
All in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Hearing none, the meeting is adjourned.